Thank you very much to Trudy for that message. And I think also refreshing and encouraging to hear that from the President's perspective, that we do have a commitment from government to actively participate and engage in a just transition, as well as really moving forward in order to attain and achieve the goals and objectives of participating in a green economy. I do see some of you do still have your feedback and sharing your commentary with us on the platform. Keep it coming, because we are looking forward to hearing more of your thoughts on how it is that we ensure that we are all move to an equitable society and environment when it comes to the green economy. And this time around, we also want you to keep your questions coming, because we will actively participate in a panel discussion. A reminder that we will be able to take your questions both here in person with our present audience, and of course those of you who will be joining us virtually, you can keep sharing those questions through the Q&A session, where you will be able to share feedback using the tab. I do want us to take the time now to introduce our panelists who will be getting and sharing some of their insight, naturally in understanding how best that we can prioritize enterprise development in a green economy. We heard Kensani challenge us. Kensi asked us the question, is green the new gold? What does that mean from your perspective as a key player within the spaces that you occupy? How is it that you can actively participate in the green economy? What questions or conundrums and maybe barriers to entry still exist within the spaces that you occupy, and perhaps challenges that we need to think about when it comes to the green economy? These are just a few of the themes that we will be peeling back at, but most importantly, also sourcing solutions to ensure that we make this a tangible experience for us within the South African environment. So I'd like to introduce my speakers who will be joining me, two of whom will be joining me virtually, but I'd like to introduce the following panelists as they do make their way on stage and on screen for this particular conversation. And if you will help me, at the end of introducing all of them, by warmly welcoming them with a level 3 applause, preferably. But Gugu McLaren Oshewekonzi joins us as the lead of the National Business Initiative's Social Transformation Unit. Puvi Pillay is Nedbank's Executive Head of Corporate Social Investment. And on your program, you might see that there is a representative from the CSIR, listed as Dr. Brian Mankla. However, we will be joined by Boyce Pillay, who joins us virtually as well as a representative of the CSIR. He is the manager of enterprise creation for development at the CSIR. Please warmly welcome my panelists and delegates and speakers who are making their way to the stage, and those joining us on the virtual platform. Puvi, thank you for your time. I don't think that was level 3, so maybe we need you to... Thank you. Perfect. Really appreciate that and your participation. Puvi, good to have you with us, and thank you so much for making time. And I think this really comes at the back of phenomenal presentations and themes that have challenged us from our earlier speakers. We do also have Gugu as well as Boyce Pillay, who are joining us on stage to give us some insight. I'll take the liberty of starting with yourself, Puvi, given that you are with me here in studio, rather in this auditorium. And of course, peeling back, yeah, it's the TV talk. Sorry. And of course, giving us your details and insight into, I guess, what Kensani has challenged us to. Green is the new gold. We're seeing a commitment from an entity like Nedbank. And I think perhaps if you can just continue to underscore some of the highlights that you had mentioned for us to fully comprehend and understand how business in South Africa is positioning itself to prioritize the green economy, specifically from a Nedbank point of view.
Sure. Just to start off with, it does feel like a studio with all these lights shining in on this side. So I think, in Kensani's remarks, it is very clear that as Nedbank, we chose to implement the green economy strategy because we believe those 4 sectors, water, waste, energy, and agriculture, is the right sectors to promote sustainable growth, sustainable economic growth, that will lead and catalyze into jobs and, enterprise development. So I think it's important for us to understand that it should not just be that it leads to jobs and it leads to something sustainable. It has to be inclusive. It has to be ecologically, we must change the ecological framework we've got now. We need to save the planet in some way. So that's also important to us. As Nedbankers, we've been involved in environmental sustainability for more than 8 decades. It's part of who our DNA is. So no doubt when we set the course for the strategy, it spoke to us. We bankers, right? So we analyzed and We did the analysis paralysis, the
The numbers must
articles,
make
the
sense.
numbers crunching, and all of that kind of stuff. And we knew that these four sectors potentially could lead to catalytic opportunities for job creation. And I just want to pause on job creation quickly. We mustn't be so obsessed with job creation that we forget enterprise development. Any thriving economy in the entire world has small businesses and medium businesses that actually provide the job opportunities, not the big corporates and public sector, that provides the job opportunities for economic emancipation, if you want to term a phrase.
Got you.
And I think that is definitely part of our thinking as well. But that did not complete, there was something more important that actually catapulted this to become our green economy strategic intervention. And that was speaking to community members directly. And quite frankly, all of the jargon and academic words that we use is meaningless to people who are trying to survive. They need money in the back of their pockets.
Yeah.
They want to drive dreams for their children and drive dreams for themselves. They want to eat, and they're in survival mode. Okay? And unemployment became quite a big thing. So if you've got four sectors that could potentially generate future jobs, then we're going to get people ready to take advantage of that.
Yeah.
And getting them ready means that we don't have to talk the language in the way we normally communicate in sessions such as this, with all due respect, but talking the language to people to say that this could lead you to live a better life. And that's why we coined the thing out, financial experts to do good. So more on the banking perspective, looking at a business lens. I think it's Michael E. Porter that says that you can do handouts, and then sooner or later something else is going to become a priority, and you stop doing the handouts. So Michael E. Porter is a famous strategist at Harvard Business School.
Shared value.
And our philosophy is not to be philanthropic at that level. Our philosophy in Nedbank is to do the following. So first thing is to take care of society's urgent needs. Okay? So you can't think about business in that philosophy on step one, on day one. Okay? Because then you're gonna kind of murky the scenario, right? And we know as a business, the reason we're doing it is not, there's a definite payback benefit to us, because we can't survive and thrive in a society that's not thriving itself. It's always in survival mode. So once we start to address that, then we can start to move on to becoming where we play a role, which is funders. We provide capital. First, we provide seed funding and to catalyze this thing, because we know that even if we're going to go into the green economy, not all communities, or most communities, can't access capital because they don't have the capability to do so. So it'll be big organizations who do so. So how do we play our role in ensuring that we catalyze funding to them? Firstly, as donor funding, because you can't expect to give people loans when they can't be able to survive themselves at the start. But once they mature themselves and they become viable businesses, a good example is Bushle. It's in your thinner handout in one of the advertorials. It's a real life example. Where they are now viable. They've gone from subsistence farming to small scale farming. Now you leverage our balance sheet. And now you can say, let's make this bigger. Let's scale this. Let's take it from 10 farms to 100 farms. And a quick example is, we're always looking at the jobs a farm can produce. What about the seeds? What about the economy of coming in for the value chain about creating a marketplace? Somebody will buy a van, employ 2 people, and now distribute the goods, etc. Water needs to be piped in, energy needs to be piped in.
What I love about this is that you're giving us a full practical example. You've almost taken us into a virtual journey, right, of how it is that Nedbank has really inculcated these principles and actually shown us that from startup to the funding, donor support, and the ripple effects that come out from that there is growth and opportunities that do lie within the green economy. And perhaps you can continue to read up on Buhle's example, because I'd like to also transition this to Gugu to get some of her feedback as she does join us. And Gugu, perhaps you can give us some of your insight and feedback into the culture of business, and if it is really managing to open up the opportunities regarding the principles that have been shared here by Puvi to fully accept, execute, and see measurable outcomes when it comes to the principles of exploring opportunities within the green economy. Gugu, if you can share some of your insight there. In other words, is what Nedbank doing having a ripple effect? Are other companies perhaps following a similar model within inculcating this culture?
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone. And it's really great to be with you, even though it would have been nice to be with you in person, but better safe than sorry. So it's I suppose it's part of my question has been answered by the number of presentations given today by companies that are clearly leaders in the space and have done the deep thinking work of understanding what needs to be done within the space. So to your point, there are companies that are definitely leaders. And you can see it in the way that they have a deep understanding of business's role within society and within the environment, and have thought through how business can improve, facilitate, and have an impact on a range of issues. And from our perspective at NBI, we are fortunate to engage with a number of companies who do this kind of work and thinking, and it shows in the way that they do their work and their strategies and their business models. We see it as, companies are all on a kind of journey. And so you'll find that some that are very much the head of the pack, they are the leaders, as you've heard many of them today. And there's some that are still making their way and moving along this journey. And so we see that the kind of magic kind of ingredients and recipes to get to that point is strong leadership who have that deep understanding, but also a good understanding of where they can make the best impact. And so in our work around economic inclusion, which has a focus on the green economy, as well as our work in the just transition, we're fortunate to work with a whole host of companies that have a long-term view and know that if we don't address these issues now, it's going to have quite a significant impact on business and business's ability to operate, business's ability to be sustainable and to grow. And so it's a mixed bag. It really depends on a number of factors. It depends on the industry. Some companies feel a lot of pressure to change and to take this transition. If you think about the high emitters as an example, who have to completely rethink their business model and their strategies because the world is changing and it has to change. And there are other companies that understand the opportunity and understand that they're able to make an impact. And in thinking about the shared value model, that can also have benefits back into their business. So I think overall, there are a lot of companies within South Africa that stand out in doing incredible work, and they are influencing and bringing along other companies. But I think that the urgency of the situation requires more to do the work and a lot quicker.
Sense of urgency, and as you say, there's some positive examples we can allude to, working off of their script and also then personalizing that to suit the various sectors that are also actively participating. Boyce, I don't want to leave you out of this conversation, so I'm keen to hear your thoughts, I guess, as a build-up in terms of identifying opportunities that do exist. Are we seeing that there's a greater sense of exciting enterprise opportunities? And Gugu's alluded to a few sectors that are doing successfully well. Nedbank in itself is not only an entity that is looking to roll out this opportunity, but also empowering others along with it in the journey, given the 4 different sectors in the economy that they've highlighted. Perhaps, Boyce, if you can share some of your insight here from a CSIR perspective, what's your research showing, where the opportunities lying, what kind of growth and prospects do exist in order to reduce the barriers to entry as well, to actively participate in a green economy?
I work in an area called Enterprise Creation for Development, and we focus on creating economic activity in all parts of the country based on the research and development work that takes place in the CSR. The CSR has been heavily involved in the green economy, and there are a number of opportunities that exist. If we're looking in terms of different categories in renewable energy, solar, wind, bioenergy, biogas, looking at biorefineries and biofuels, where you use products and residues to produce high-value products, use alien invasive species to produce high-value products. Look at waste management. There's a lot of work being done in terms of food waste across the agriculture and food value chain. There's a lot of opportunity to utilize the food waste to create economic activity. Similarly, if you look at electronic waste, There's a lot of opportunity to extract high value minerals from electronic items. You look at tire recycling. If you take tires, you can cut them up, you can separate the tires into to rubber, steel, and textiles. And then you can use the rubber and you can granulate it to make rubber crumb. And you can also then, with the crumb, make value-added products. If you look at farming and smart farming, you can use robotics to monitor and monitoring and harvesting of farming. You use precision agriculture, where you use satellite data, drone data, remote sensing devices to monitor and optimize farming operations. There's also a strong focus on regenerative agriculture. And then also sustainable farming systems. I think if you look at food production in terms of the availability of arable land and the water scarcity that we have in South Africa, it is very important for us to look at sustainable farming systems where we use smaller pieces of land and less water. So technologies such as vertical agriculture, hydroponics, aquaculture, and aquaponics. So there's a variety of technology solutions in the green economy space.
Got you. Thanks for that. And I think it really does help us build on that particular outcome in terms of where the opportunities lie, how it is that these businesses are being established, and most importantly, how we can partner with them. This speaks to a critical theme as well that we are hearing, and of course, that I'd like to link back to the theme that we've been hearing for today, right? Reconnecting. It's the purpose, connection with community, collaborative opportunities as well. And perhaps, Gugu, I'd like to share this question with both yourself as well as Puvi here, just in terms of the skill set and the talent base, right, that we do require. Because many do say, well, we want to move to a green economy, but well, we're a nation that's relied on its national resources quite heavily. So we'll continue doing what we've been doing because I guess it just works. And that really speaks to innovative entrepreneurs that you're looking to support and finance here, Puvi. And also, I guess, Gugu, from your perspective, the skills that does need to be developed and I guess potential areas of collaboration between big business and small business. So I'm asking a large number of questions here, but primarily linking it to skills. What are we seeing in terms of the development or lack thereof that's taking place? And perhaps if the skills opportunities being addressed by the collaborative efforts between big business and small business. Perhaps, Gugu, if you can give us your thoughts there, and Puvi, if you can come in to help elaborate on what you're witnessing on the ground and perhaps, how as a bank you've facilitated particular transactions and support for these businesses, both big and small, and focusing on the skills aspect. Gugu, your thoughts?
Thank you so much for that question. I think it's an important one and one that we grapple with from an MBI perspective. One of our key areas of work in our economic inclusion program is in installation, repair, and maintenance, which works with TVET colleges to provide demand-led skills for young people, understanding obviously the huge challenge of youth unemployment and ensuring that the skills they have is applicable within the industry. And this has an underpinning within the green economy and looking at how you can instill those kind of skills. What we're trying to deal with and tackle is the current urgent issue of youth unemployment. But as you said, within the context of understanding that we're going through this transition and we need to be thinking forward around what are those skills of the future and how do we start preparing for those? And that's a large focus of our work in trying to understand, well, what does that look like? What does it look like? What are the skills? What are the jobs of the future? And how can we start now working within the ecosystem to ensure that we're able to provide those skills to young people, that we're able to reskill people who are already within the job market where we see these changes and transitions happening. And so it's a tricky place because in our context in South Africa, there's this urgency that we need to do now. And then there's also looking forward. And so it's really around how we can establish relationships and partnerships that understand the context, and we can work to tackle both of those almost simultaneously. Providing the skills now, but also thinking about, well, what are the skills that are applicable in the future. And so our focus on installation, repair, and maintenance aims to do just that, and working within TVET colleges to build capacity to be able to deliver that. And we've seen a number of companies come on board to support this work. We work with Nedbank, we do work with Old Mutual, ABSA, and SAPI as some of the examples of companies thinking around this work. We're also doing work within the township economies with SMEs.
Gotcha.
And that's an interesting space because, again, it speaks to this tension around what needs to happen now and the pressures that SMEs experience now, and then the forward looking. And so in our engagements and our work with SMEs and in talking about the opportunities of the green economy, there is this challenge to say, well, you know, we need bread and butter right now, and we need to be able to do our business now. And those opportunities aren't readily available. And so again, this speaks to how we can collectively think about creating those opportunities so that SMEs have an understanding of, well, if I start thinking in this way, I will be able to access jobs, and I will be able to access supply chains, etc. So I think it talks to quite a deep and long-term kind of ecosystem change that we are trying to drive with our partners, our member companies, but also broader stakeholders. But it is a challenging space within our context, but we're seeing some wins, even though we know that it is going to be a long-term project.
Got you. You mentioned installation, repair, and maintenance, and I think it's so refreshing because whenever we think about, moving into the green economy, we always think about the digital skills that are required. But you understand that you need to marry both the practicalities of what we're trying to do on the ground versus the use and aid of technology here as well. And Puvi, when you read through the Trialogue handbook, you would appreciate that when we take a look at CSI initiatives, a large majority of financing is actually allocated to education. And that in itself also helps us then unpack how it is that we need to expand on not only spending on education, but education that will assist us in growing and expanding in the green economy. So there are linkages that I'm identifying here, and I think quite important for us perhaps to step back, evaluate where we sit and how it is that we can actively participate in them. But building up on what Gugu's mentioned, you guys have certainly partnered with them on certain initiatives. How has, I guess, the skills development perspective of things, the collaborative efforts between big businesses as well as startups, played an influence as to how Nedbank approaches its investments and support overall of the green economy?
The best way I can approach answering this is through our experience. So we've been at this now for just over a year and a half, and we've learned some valuable lessons, both positive and negative. And I'll deal with the first part of the question philosophically and then give an example practically. Philosophically, I think some of the lessons we've learned is we need to partner. So I know we're dealing with skills, but whoever we're partnering with to develop that, we need to know why they're doing it. Too often, we're entering into kind of partnerships where the why is not clear. So we're very clear why we want to do this. The partner we're doing it with, are they clear? And then whom we're doing it with is critical. It may affect the skills development at the end, but if there's not the right leadership, the same obsession and commitment and passion behind this to drive the outcomes, you've got to walk the talk, basically, especially on delivery. And then finally, how we're doing it. I think this is a very simple model on how to go about dealing with it. I think some of the challenges I've seen is skills for the sake of skills. And actually skills development is an input to an outcome for economic gain. So does the skill lead to an economically better outcome? Do people get paid? Does the farm have the production level to be able to on-sell, whether it's water, waste, energy, or agriculture? In any other example, skills development is but a necessary journey in the process of getting an outcome. And too often when we finish with the skill, we think, that's cool, we tick the box, we'll get a nice, bling in, and then we move on. But that's not the point. And practically, I think Indalo, sitting in the room, Indalo Inclusive, they actually outside in the stand, the Nedbank stand, is understanding the level of leadership and commitment required in order to go through the process to incubate people for the right skills so that an outcome is possible. You can produce a bottle of water, you can now sell it, you can employ people, and it brings an outcome. So I think for me, the point I want to land is skills development by itself is not going to take us anywhere.
True. Exactly, and as you say, it does need to have a ripple effect and actually transcend beyond that. I do want to double check with us if there are any questions in the room, just to make sure that we're able to address them from a practical point of view. I do see your hand, sir. We're happy to take at least 3 questions. Your hand has been noted, ma'am. Any on this side of the room? The far end there. And I think very important that we understand the practicalities of how it is that we do move forward with the green economy. And of course, most importantly, enterprise development is a key focus of that area. Yes, you need the skills. Yes, you've got the financing, but you also need to make sure that it does transition into significant changes in the environment. I'm not too sure if you have the microphone just yet, sir. Not yet? Not yet, but I do believe the lady behind you does have it. As soon as it's done, we'll make sure that it gets to you. If you can, one of my colleagues will identify you. Whoever has the microphone first, if you could please start first with your question, ma'am. We are happy to address your question.
Yes. Hello.
If you could please be specific as to which panelist you're asking your question for.
I suppose it's directed to Nedbank and other corporates in the green economy. So my name is Jennifer. I'm from Jumpstart Foundation Trust. I work quite a lot in the green economy. And we've been talking for the past 2 years a lot about the green and inclusive COVID recovery, and the tagline for that is Build Back Better. And we're sitting right now with a situation in KZN, and to a lesser extent in the Eastern Cape, where we're going to be building back massive amounts of infrastructure. And I have a twofold question. Is there political will to build back better when we look at the billions of rands of roads and housing and water and sanitation and so forth infrastructure that needs to be built immediately? And what is the role that corporates like Nedbank and other corporates, maybe NBI members, can play in maybe filling that gap or helping to catalyze Build Back Better today, not in the future, but like right now? Thank you.
Thank you so much for your question, Jennifer. We will address that question shortly. As the mic makes its way to you, sir, please keep your hand up just to make it easy for my colleague to identify you. I do understand there's a question on this end.
Thank you, Chairperson. My name is Mashishimala Tsepojaji. I'm currently attached to the Department of Public Enterprises. You will know that we are responsible for about 7 state-owned companies. So part of what I do is oversight of transformation issues within those state-owned companies. Now, CSI is one important activity that the state-owned companies are doing, and we sort of having issues now. You know, resources are running out of our state-owned companies are no longer making money as they were doing previously. So we need to understand if there is an appetite from Nedbank, especially when it comes to green economy, to partner with some of our state-owned companies. We have a program now with Safcol. It's a forestry company. They are based in Mpumalanga, KZN, and Limpopo. They've started a program on agroforestry. It's a nice program, so we would wonder if Nedbank will have an appetite to partner on that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your question, sir. Direct and to the point. You can go ahead with your question, sir.
Thanks very much. My name is Mark Gerard from Wildlife Act. My question is directed at Puvi. And just specifically Nedbank, you've got some really great CSI initiatives, and obviously with those 4 pillars that you're focusing on, you're also, as a financial institution, privileged to be in a position that you are investing or lending money to other businesses, be they whatever phase they're in. Part of the opportunity is to develop those companies or businesses to work towards a nature positive stance. And I just wanted to ask and find out, is Nedbank sort of helping to drive that? So are there criteria for your clients that you can sort of mentor them or guide them or sort of force them into working towards a more nature positive business? Or is that something that's still sort of further down the line?
Thank you so much. Very valid question that we had from Mark, Mashishi, as well as Jennifer. Really appreciate that. Puvi, you're a man in demand.
Can I go from 3 to 1? I'll remember them better.
Perfect. Let's start off with
Thanks.
Mark's question.
So, absolutely, Mark. First thing is in our corporate and investment banking. Right? These are big corporates. We're incentivizing them to go sustainable. So they get better rates, they get better relationship capabilities, we provide them better tools, etc., at either the same costing or a cheaper costing. And that's well documented. Our CIB program is well into environmental kind of funding. You could see it publicly, you could Google it, you can also see it in mass media at this point in time. So that's definitely a philosophy that's happening. That has then transposed itself into our business banking at a smaller level. Now, understand it's easier for us to install certain conditions on big business because they have the capital intensive balance sheets to be able to comply. When it comes to business banking, we use a smaller level of criteria, but that's growing over a period of time. So from year on year, sometimes that actually doubles, the criteria. So that's a very positive sign going forward. We also need to be cognizant that it's expensive for some businesses to comply. Okay, and then on the retail side, we are definitely starting. I don't know if you've seen stuff like the Evo platform that Nedbank has, Unlock.me, etc., where we are incentivizing people to think about the future as our own clients. And hopefully it's not just one client. There may be somebody banking with us from a household of 5, one person. That conversation in the dinner table is going to influence another 4 people. So we don't only see it as this is our client base, that's the only thing we're going to have to look after. So hopefully that spurs on. And it's not only our job to do that. It's for the entire banking sector, financial sector to spur that on. And I think we're on that journey. So definitely we are incentivizing that. And we're trying to create the link between where we are on corporate social investment to how we run our businesses and how we do things. This is how we operate here, kind of. We're on that journey. We're not there yet. Question 2 was about partnerships with especially public organizations. Absolutely. We have a lot to learn. We've learned a lot. We've partnered with the CSIR and we've learned about everything from what happens in mine dumps to what's going on, etc. And it's eye-opening for us. We as Nedbank, we fully understand we are playing a role in this journey. We are not the exclusive right to the whole. So we need we invite NGOs, PBOs, public organizations, etc., to partner with us because the outcome is better. Even if we all share in the outcome is so beautiful and powerful that we'll all get more than our fair share of the pie in any case. Exactly. So that's our thinking. On question 1, I cannot answer part A if there's a public will. I'm not the right person to do so. But part B was, what do we do in terms of, I think it was building
back better and facilitating that political will.
Especially on infrastructure, right? My biggest concern on crises is the following. In the first 48 hours, everybody goes, we got to do something. And then food aid, food parcels, everything. And then it happens for 2 weeks. And Nedbank plays its role in that. I mean, recently and even in the previous crisis, we would always immediately, gift of the givers, facilitate for funding for immediate relief. What happens 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, 2 years later, 5 years later? The banks are broken, houses are destroyed. That's not going to get repaired in 2 weeks. So, and luckily, Kensani, I can't even see with all these lights here, but with the kind of leadership we have, we're always thinking long term. And the long term thing is when we had the crisis, for instance, previously with the rioting, we were thinking about how to build businesses back rather than just food parcels. And now we got to think about infrastructure. So I think it's important, and not just Nedbank. Organizations that are out there need to start balancing between how do we relieve immediate pain and suffering, and also think about what's going to happen when the next flood comes, etc.
Exactly. And we're seeing evidence of that, right? There was a shortage of jet fuel at OR Tambo International Airport, damages based on the flood, impacting infrastructure, and then means that some of you won't be able to make it here because you can't catch your flight because of flight delays or cancellations because of jet fuel. So really a multi-pronged approach and speaks to a vast environment of areas and sectors that we need to tap into. There is another opportunity for questions, but I do want to address that political will question perhaps very briefly to Boyce. It's an unfair one that I guess putting you on the spot, but appreciating the fact that the CSIR is also an institution that is a public institution. Perhaps you can unpack the political will from an enterprise development point of view and the role that you serve there, Boyce. Are we seeing that practicality come through? As Boyce does respond to that question, I'm keen for you to raise your hands if there are any more questions. We'll take one more round of questions before hearing the closing remarks from our panelists. Boyce, if you could kindly respond to that thought for us, please. Not sure if we're able to hear him in the background, or I'll tell you what, Boyce, we're having some technical troubles getting you through. And
I was on mute.
there we go. Loud and clear. Oh, you fell into the 2020 trap. You can continue with your response, please, sir.
Yes, I'm sorry. I won't be able to respond to the political side of it, but I think just to say that institutions like the CSR, public entities, have started to assist with disaster relief, making technology available, using our capabilities to assist with decision making. So definitely public entities like the CSR have a strong role to play in, a national role to play in addressing floods and other disasters.
Got you on that one. Thank you, though, for providing us with that feedback. Any final questions that we can take from you here on the floor? We've got a follow-up from Mark. Mark, we'll take it as your hand is the only one that I see up in the room. Any other questions after Mark? Please feel free to raise your hand fairly high. It's just easier for my colleagues to identify you because the lights are a bit glaring. Go ahead, Mark. They will switch on the mic in the background. It is on, but you may continue. Oh, your mic is on mute, Mark.
Is that working?
Much
There we
better.
go. My question will go to Gugu, and it's around. So we're talking about companies and businesses that are wanting to invest in the green economy, but also wanting to create more sustainability within their sort of area of operation and their spheres. Do the majority of companies have that sort of specialized knowledge around the table, within the boardroom tables or within their leadership to guide that? What I find from the conservation sector is we often the ones late to the party, and we get there once the plan has already been developed. But we can't change the plan at that stage. So I just want to understand from the sort of the think tank part of a company and the strategic planning of the company, is that knowledge sitting there?
Got you. That question's for Gugu, right? Perfect. Gugu, if you can respond to that for us, please.
Thank you so much. And a very important question. I think that from what we see, the majority of companies don't have that insight as yet. I think if you look at what boards and excos look like currently, I think that we can all agree that there is a lot of room for more diversity along a host of different aspects. And so I think what becomes important is how we bridge business with civil society, as an example. And it's one of the things that from an NBI perspective we do, which is around how you bring in other perspectives and how you bring in expert insights. I do think your point is valid. I do think that there is the tendency to get going on things without necessarily doing the kind of due diligence, the kind of stakeholder engagement that can really deepen and strengthen an intervention and an initiative. I think that this is an area of where companies can do better, and possibly one where there is scope from all sides to find a way of engaging. And I say that knowing that civil society, government, and business can come together better to sort out these issues. And when you see examples of that happening, you see the impact that it can have. But I do think that there's something that we need to do within our South African society that bridges these divides and finds a way of meeting in the middle and finding these solutions. There are, as I said, examples of these happening, but it's definitely an area that needs to be strengthened.
Definitely. I do think that many themes, and Mark, you've really touched on a number of questions that we can all walk away with here. And Gugu, perhaps to stay with you and with the rest of the panelists, because we're well aware that this is a conference which looks to assist and support NPOs. We're looking to make sure that the impact on the ground from a CSI point of view is felt, that it's tangible, and of course does have ripple effects to then foster into enterprise development and speak to the overriding theme of shared value. And I guess for the NPOs in the room who might be looking to adopt and use technology, solicit that funding and support from Vodacom, but at the same time need to start thinking, how is it that they speak to Nedbank's mandate? How is it that they also speak to the innovative and innovation mandate, rather, of the CSIR? My final question to all three of you, and if you can keep it succinct, please, is what is it that NPOs need to start doing or thinking about differently in order to enhance their participation within the green economy? Gugu, I'll start with you as you're still on screen. Following that, we'll come to you, Puvia, and of course get closing remarks from Boise as well. But what is it that NPOs need to consider about actively participating in the green economy? Gugu, you can go ahead.
Sure, you're not closing off on a light note. This is a challenging one. I think probably from my observation from a number of angles, being having worked within an NPO and corporate, I do think there's something that speaks to understanding the strategy and understanding the perspectives and aligning that. So a deeper, as you've touched on, a deeper understanding of where corporates focus is. We know that we want a strategic focus for companies, and therefore finding that alignment and almost speaking the language becomes important. And I think moving beyond a transactional relationship, but really one that's partnership. I do think that is something that requires obviously both sides, but I think if we're going to see that impact, we need to get to that point. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gugu. Puvi, your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a challenging question. I have my views on it, but hopefully it lands as best as possible. So I don't think it's just a challenge to the NPOs or the BPOs. I think it's a challenge to us as well, as funders. I'll use a simple model, think, feel, do. I think in the CSI space, there's a lot of thinking and there's a lot of good work and good insights and a lot of stuff that's really informative. So I think we've got that pretty buttoned down. I think the feeling stuff, people don't work in this kind of work if they don't have the empathy to want to work here. So I think there's a lot of feeling, and people, are sometimes sympathetic rather than empathetic, and we must be careful of the balance between those two.
True.
And in the last one is where the challenge is. We need to start to deliver. We need to transition, and all of us, I mean the companies, I mean private sector, public sector, everybody, NPOs need to transition from the thinking and feeling and overweighting that to the delivery. It's one thing coming up with a strategy, it's another thing having an intent and a dream to do all of this stuff, and we've been dreaming in South Africa for quite a while. It's another thing to have the capability, competency, leadership, and all of that ability to actually go and deliver. And it takes a thick skin, it takes a different sort of mindset, and you've got to roll your sleeves up. And that doesn't mean to say you have to be at the feeding scheme on a Saturday to do. No. The doing is the outcome that society is better, there's economic emancipation, and people have freedom with the right to have freedom, that they actually have the ability to live a better life. So I do think that the biggest challenge for me, from what I've seen, and I've come from a business environment where I think the same philosophy on how you want to make a business successful is exactly the same philosophy we should take on how we want to make projects successful, without the capitalistic mindset, with the socialistic mindset. But the principles is that. Some of the things that I think, and this is stuff we talk about in the team, is zero tolerance for mediocrity. Just because we're funding a good cause doesn't mean to say we can go at it half-baked. There's no excuse for that. The other thing is that, to deliver a project takes discipline. Coming to meetings on time, delivering, making sure that you are obsessed about it, tracking, measuring, all of that stuff that's not sexy versus all of the stuff that is sexy. And I think we can do a lot better if we can get that right. And then the final point I want to make is, apart from that model, is partnerships.
Yes.
There is just so much opportunity. And I think sometimes we make it a competitive space. So even in the financial industry, as an example, this is not a competitive space, it's a collaborative space. The outcome is better if we all do it. And I think sometimes it's like we all need to see each other's challenges first, like private versus public sector. I think we should, if we start there, we will not get out of it. And that's why I like what we started with today: is imagine the future. Imagine start where the possibility of imagination is, rather than what the problem is today.
Got
Because
you.
if we start there, we stay stuck there. Thanks.
Speaks to being solutions driven. Thanks for that, Puvi. If we could close off with yourself, Boyce. Very interesting perspective, I guess, because your background is from an enterprise development point of view, but how it is and what it is that NPOs need to be thinking differently about the green economy.
Thank you for the question. Yes, I think NPOs are very close to the communities and beneficiaries. So one of the biggest roles that they can play is to help identify potential economic development opportunities, especially sustainable economic development activities. So initiatives that, when implemented, can have a long-term sustainable impact, rather than the short-term interventions that are needed in cases of emergency, but eventually we want to create sustainable economic activity in the country. And also, it's important, very important, to try to make these economic activities technology intensive, using the latest technology, the latest innovation that can work and become sustainable. And I think the other very important point, once opportunities are identified, it's important to bring in the right role players, form the right partnerships to package these opportunities for implementation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Boyce, for your feedback. I think phenomenal insights that we've heard from all of our panelists when it comes to unpacking the green economy, right? The excitement is there, the chutzpah is there, but as has been highlighted, we do need to be quite cognizant of how it is that we approach it. Everything from understanding and fully unpacking the purpose. What is the end goal that we're working towards? Challenging us to rethink and, of course, reimagine what that future looks like. Actively partnering with individuals and businesses and companies that have been doing it right. And, of course, allowing NPOs, like businesses, like sponsors as well, to rethink and reimagine what their involvement and participation surely is. It's a multi-pronged approach. It's quite clear that this is a journey that we're going to be embarking on for quite a while, as the outcomes and the results themselves will also unpack in the upcoming years. But a worthwhile experience nonetheless, and it's quite igniting and invigorating to see that financial services institutions, members of the business community, and think tanks are also participating, and that the innovation is also coming through there from a wide variety of sectors. And this in itself allows us to consider how else can we play a role within the green economy. Well, I'd like to thank my panelists. You've left us with a lot to think about and consider and apply back into organizations that we will serve in future and currently. And of course, even, I guess, challenging ourselves as to hold on. Why can't we do this more differently and innovatively to actually speak to the mandate of the green economy? So please give all my panelists a round of applause. Boyce, Gugu, as well as Puvi. Puvi, as we make our way. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I guess a lot that we've really heard some insight on this morning that has given us some clarity as to how it is that we reconnect, how it is that we do rebuild, how it is that we also build back better, as we've heard from several of the speakers. But as we've come to the end of the second session for today, I know that I'm standing between you and lunch, but I think that there's a few pointers that I'd like to share with you before I let you go, and to our online delegates who are joining us in conversation for today. We certainly were challenged, right, by Helen this morning, who said, well, allow yourself to be open-minded to the variety of solutions that can be brought to the table. We also heard from one of our other speakers who also challenged us in terms of making sure that Ubuntu is at the center of what it is that we do discuss, as we heard from Professor Madonsela, how it is that we don't just bounce back, but bounce forward, doing so in a better manner and in a way that is managed and also quite effective. We also had an international speaker who challenged us to rethink, just reimagine. If you take all the policy out of it, if you take the politics and political will out of it, the challenge of being profitable versus also having an impact and a purpose, how is it that you reimagine the future that you're looking to actively participate in? And through all of that, it reminded us as well that as we make these approaches, we do need to keep communicating community and society at the center of it all. Through key partnerships, that's how it is that we'll be able to expand on the impact that we're trying to drive home. That in itself speaks to also looking at the broader impact on society and the livelihoods of communities, that it's not an isolated incident, feel, or event. It doesn't just speak to your business or mine, but the collaborative efforts and exchanges that we're having. On that note, I really want to thank you for your participation here today, because it's really left us with a lot more questions that we need to consider as to how do we approach things differently and adequately contribute not only to the conversation, but most importantly to the solutions that we're trying to bring to the table. I would like to thank our panelists and participants throughout the course of this morning for having given us their feedback, their guidelines, and their thoughts. And of course, to all of you who've also interacted, not only on the platform by sharing your feedback as well, but of course for also asking your questions. And hopefully these have also allowed you to walk away with some tangible solutions that you can implement in your organizations, or maybe even deliberate on further to unpack different solutions that you can bring to the table. Now, before we let you go, I do want to remind you that there will be a breakaway session that will commence promptly at 2:30 sharp. The sessions that will be facilitated by Synovation, as we heard from Helen earlier on. This is where we'll unpack much of the conversations we've participated in today. So over lunch, you get some time just to sit back and mull over it, but come back with your brain being refueled and reinvigorated to actually fully discuss and participate in the workshops that will be taking place here promptly at 2:30. We also want to remind you that we would like to see and hear your feedback. So if you do take a look at your delegate pack, you will notice that we do have a feedback form. This feedback form is for us to ensure that we do build back better. In the next hybrid event and conference that we'll be hosting next year, we'd like to ensure that we follow up on some of the positive suggestions that you recommend, and most importantly, do better on where it is that you believe that we perhaps might have fallen short. So we encourage you to please complete those feedback forms and share them with us. Bear in mind, though, that the feedback form is for the next 2 days. So I'm telling you this today to make sure that you keep the feedback form in a safe space, not in the boot of your car, because tomorrow we'll need you to complete it and share it back with us at the registration tables for us to make sure that we're able to get your feedback. A link will be shared to those with those who are joining us virtually in order to participate and share their feedback form as well. Well, I hope that all of you are quite comfortable. It's been a lot to take in. How are you feeling? Inspired? Confused? Maybe you can shout a few words and we can pick up from there. Inspired? Anyone else feeling? Well, ma'am, I think you have concluded it for everyone by saying all of the above. Well, we really appreciate your participation and your patience with us today. Despite the technical delays, to the audience that has joined us online, please do appreciate that we understand the difficulties you've experienced. However, we will work on it effectively. As was mentioned earlier this morning, technology is a great friend, but sometimes it's a little bit fickle. So please do bear with us. However, we will ensure that the connectivity is better tomorrow, including your participation in the room here. Thank you so much for your patience with us throughout the course of the program. Helen, you have something to say before I let you go. Yes. Got you. Thank you so much. That's a very important piece of information that I had forgotten there. If you'd like to participate in the conversation that took place earlier around equitable philanthropy, that will happen here in this room, and directions to actually participate in conversations around the green economy as well as enterprise development, that's happening upstairs. So please do be mindful of that, because at 2:30 we will move into those different rooms. So please allocate yourselves accordingly, the room as well as the conversation that you'd like to participate in. Philanthropy here, and of course, the green economy happening upstairs. Ladies and gentlemen, we also want to strongly encourage you to participate in the breakaway sessions, because after that, that's when you can mingle, that's when you can rub shoulders, mask on or mask off, because we will be hosting our cocktail and networking function just after 4:30. So if there's any incentive for you to stay a little bit longer, I'm hoping that that does add a sweetener to the day. Thank you so much. We will see you again promptly tomorrow, bright and early at 8:30. It's been a pleasure having all of you with us. I think for yourselves, for the speakers, and of course for the interaction and feedback we've had today. Level 3 applause, please. There we go. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Enjoy lunch. We'll see you again tomorrow morning at 8:30. But before that, please do remember to come back to the breakaway sessions happening promptly at 2:30 here as well as upstairs.